Ladies and gentlemen, should we podcast?
Let's podcast.
The guest today, the man, the myth, the legend,
Maybe.
Alex Miller.
I might be a legend eventually. We'll see.
A legend in the working. A
legend.
legend. What would be it called? A legend being built.
Yes.
In
progress.
Like that. A legend in progress.
In
there
progress.
we go.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm super excited to pick your brain.
Yeah.
For everybody listening, I don't even know you that well.
Yeah.
But I've gotten to interact with you on a professional level, and I've gotten to kind of watch your, I'll just call it your entrepreneurship. Evolution over the last little while. With purchasing not one but two businesses, and like the community involvement doubling down on, and the networking group and all of that stuff. And so anyway, anytime I get to sit across the table from somebody that's like truly entrepreneurial minded, I kind of geek out over it.
Sure.
So I'm excited to pick your brain.
Heck yeah, man.
Where I want to start is your background. Talk to me about, and I don't even know if this is your first entrepreneurial kind of journey or not, but walk me through, kind of the background and how you got to the point where you're starting to purchase some businesses.
My journey is all over the place. Like, it's so, man, I started in like the office. I started selling copiers and printers. That was my first job out of high school.
Like pretty much Dunder Mifflin?
Yes.
So it's funny, quick anecdote on that, but my dad made a living selling, first he was selling office supplies for Boise Cascade, and then he moved to their cardboard division.
Yeah.
And forever at the office, they had Boise Cascade paper in those early episodes in there. Awesome. And so we'd be like, hey, check it out.
Yeah, that's sweet.
And then we'd give him a hard time that, you have to be a great salesman to sell empty boxes. Of course, now I know how lucrative the packaging industry is, but
very much. Yeah. So
crazy.
So I did that. I graduated in 2009 from college, which was like the worst year in history to graduate.
To go get a job.
Yeah. Because, I think the statistic was like, more than 2/3 of graduates did not come out of college with a job.
Wow.
And so it was a good 9 months for me before I got a job. And so then I did that. That was in 2009, and moved up to Minneapolis, working for some company that's worth a ton of money now, but I didn't want to sell copiers and printers all through my life. So I moved from there to Chicago, and I was selling medical devices.
Cool.
Yeah, for a startup company out of Austin, Texas. And so they made oxygen concentrators.
Interesting.
Yeah, so portable oxygen concentrators. Usually you see like somebody dragging around a tent, or a canister. Like a canister of oxygen that you can't take that on a plane. You can't really travel with that. So this was battery powered, and it was like this big. And so that was really cool. But it wasn't really my bag, but it did get me onto the next thing. And so, because I started working in hospitals a lot, and I really liked what hospital administrators did. And funny enough, I had some guy come up to me one day, and he was wearing that portable oxygen concentrator, and he's like, "Are you the portable oxygen concentrator guy?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Man, you totally saved my life." And I was like, I'm like 22, selling stuff.
Right.
Like, you don't think about that.
About
like,
the impact,
Yeah. And
How
so,
cool.
Yeah, and so that was really impactful for me, just to like think about that this may be more than a job. And that a job means something, like the job that you do means something to the people that you serve.
Yeah.
Rather than just like a means
Just
of
a
making
paycheck.
money or a paycheck or whatever else. And
Right.
so that kind of led me on this path elsewhere. But I made a stop at Groupon first.
Oh, cool.
And I was working at Groupon in Chicago for like a year and a half too. So
Awesome.
Just like what every young person does in Chicago. Like
Right.
Everybody worked there in the early to mid 2000s because it was cool.
Blowing up.
Yeah, it was blowing up.
I remember those are those early days of digital marketing, digital advertising.
Yeah.
So at the time, that same kind of period of time, I was working for a platform called Buzztown.
Okay.
Which was like Durango's local, it was at the time similar to Groupon, where everybody was trying to build their own social or like digital platform.
Yeah.
And then we quickly realized like we may as well just join the people that are winning.
Yep.
Putting our energy into Google and Facebook and stuff like that. But that was a wild time.
It was a wild time.
Those like early 2010s.
Yep.
With Groupon and all the different platforms.
Like Living Social, but they were all trying to figure out what their niche was going to be too.
Yeah.
And so there was like 10 niches that they were trying to work through. And so I was working in the travel space, like Groupon Getaways, selling travel packages and trying to work with hotels and that kind of thing.
What did you study in school?
Marketing and international business.
Okay, cool.
So I went to the University of Montana to study that.
A degree in marketing, but then a personality for sales.
Yeah, I guess so. I think at that time I just didn't really have the confidence for it. You know, so that was something I really had to build, was just like, can I do this? You know, some of the sales were difficult. It was like you're learning to compete on price, you're learning to compete on value. Like, I also look back at that and reflect on some of the things that maybe were working against me. Like, I'm a very young looking person, and 15 years ago I was even younger looking.
Even younger, yeah.
So it's like you walk into somewhere and they're like, oh, who's this little kid? And so I think that was kind of working against me in a way. Maybe that's just my subconscious, but
right.
I do reflect on that and think back, like, oh, I wonder if I was really taken seriously.
Yeah.
But maybe I wasn't, or maybe it was just that my sales skills weren't polished enough to like separate me from other salespeople and separate me from that kind of like young looking persona.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the good thing about the Groupon one is that was all inside sales. So it was like just the phone, but I just knew I didn't want to do that forever. And so I kept thinking about that experience that I had in the hospital, and that actually led me back to healthcare administration. And so I ended up going to graduate school at University of Iowa. So I'm from Iowa originally, and I got a master's degree in healthcare administration. And so did that for a couple of years. That was really cool. Thought to myself, I think I want to be like a CEO or a COO of a hospital. No. Like, no.
Maybe the only thing harder than entrepreneurship.
Yes. Like, so I did that for a while, and so what you do after you get a MHA, that's what it's called, Master's in Health Administration, is you generally do a fellowship, and it's kind of like a residency for administrators.
Okay.
So you usually have like somebody in the executive suite is kind of mentoring you and teaching you how a hospital runs and the different departments of it, and setting you up with projects and other people who might be other mentors for you. And my mentor was just not engaged. And so she kind of like pushed me elsewhere to other people, and it was a tough experience. And, where my heart really was at that time was like children's hospitals. I just liked them because they have a fun atmosphere for something so dreadful as a children's hospital. Like, if you're going to a children's hospital, it's usually pretty bad.
Right.
But they have this unique way of making them like kind of happy, and it's a weird thing to experience when you walk into something and it's colorful and like everything is designed for small people.
Yeah.
There's like games all over the place and animals and stuff, and it's like, but you're also here for maybe some of the worst things of your life.
Right.
And so it was funny because there was a moment where I was talking to my preceptor about like, what do I do? Do I choose like the children's path, or do I choose this other path, which was post-acute care, which is like the other end of life, like nursing homes.
Oh, yeah.
And so she was like, well, the business is going to be, from a business decision, I think that you should go into to the post-acute care element of it. And it was such a turning point, because it was like my heart wasn't there, but I took the advice of somebody who had been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
And I just totally hated it.
And that's because that was the tone of that advice, or like the perspective of that advice, purely from a business perspective, do you think? Like, when you get to look back now, I don't know, and obviously young and learning and things like that, but I wonder if that was like, if that had more from an economic perspective rather than like
it's possible,
follow your passion type perspective.
Yeah, it was a funny thing because it was just very matter of fact, and I guess what I was expecting from my preceptor was maybe a little bit more like understanding,
like discovery and dive in,
and discussion about like, well, hey, this is a really good business decision, but it sounds like your heart's here,
right? And
so it was very, and this was like the chief operating officer of the entire system.
Yeah, so you looked up to him.
Of course I did. Like, she had made it, and she had come from like a very like, she started as, she might have been like a lab tech. That was her first job, and now she's the chief operating officer of this huge health system in Washington. So of course you're going to like take that advice and take it really seriously. And so it just burnt me out. And then I was sitting in an office of another mentor of mine who, she had been a nurse at that health system for like 40 years. And, she finally got to me and sat down, and she was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I think I'd like to be, a CEO or a COO of a hospital. And she's like, well, you have good skills, but she's like, do you want to have a family? And I was like, I'd really like to. She's like, do you want to have kids and a wife? And I was like, yeah. Well, that sounds nice. She's like, I hope you have a really understanding spouse. And it was just like such a like heavy hit.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang. Because when you really think about it, like, hospitals don't close.
Right.
And when you are that representative of a hospital, you're a huge person in the community. And like, you're responsible for the things that happen, and you are the figurehead for that mechanism that serves the health of the community.
Right.
So I thought about like the weight of that, and I was just like, man, I just don't know if that's for me. I don't know if I want to take that on.
Yeah.
Maybe not that I couldn't have, but it was more like a question of like, what kind of life do I want to live?
Right. Isn't that funny when somebody they'll like say something in passing,
yeah,
or casual, and it just hits you like a ton of bricks, like a profound statement that somebody casually said.
Yeah, and it was so weird because I had never even considered that. Like, we're sitting there and she's like, I hope you have a really understanding spouse. And I was just like, huh. And then I thought about all these people who are in the executive suite, and I was like, well, I've never met their spouse. I don't know if, like, they're always here.
Right.
And I don't know what else they do. So, yeah, this actually makes a lot of sense. And so that just kind of pushed me out. And so it was time to find something else. And I ended up finding a company called Bright Horizons, which is you'd probably know, people would probably know them best as a child care company. They have about 1,000 daycare centers across the nation.
Okay, cool.
But they offer their services as a benefit. And so it's a benefit to employers to help for the employers to subsidize the cost of childcare for their employees.
Right.
It's used as a recruiting tool. It's used as a number of different things. So they have a bunch of education services for 0 to 18-year-olds, and then they have, some elder care stuff too. So I was doing that, and I was like the director of network growth for the backup care organization, which is like what happens when your normal child care situation falls through.
Got it. Yeah.
And so built that, grew that, had fun with that. Did that for about 7 years, worked remote for about 5 years, but I just got bored. It was one of those things. I'm a big believer as a leader that you're always kind of training your replacement. And so I had really trained people that were my employees to do my job.
Yeah.
And so for the last couple of years of my job, I was just like, you guys know how to do this. Like, you don't really need me that much. And then like I'd go on trips or vacations and stuff, and I'd be like, how'd it go? They're like, well, everything went fine. And I'm like, okay, this is a really good sign that I'm like not really.
You did a good job. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're also like nervous about that because you don't want to like eliminate yourself.
Right.
So I still have a wife to
still need a job.
Yeah, like yeah, exactly. Like, so it was all that. So it like really, all that time that I had really pushed me to think about like, well, what do I want to do and like what feels good?
Yeah.
And so I started to discover some entrepreneurship stuff. I thought about like, well, do I want to start a business? Gosh, that's a huge commitment. And, there's also like I needed to have an income still. And if you start a business and you don't have an income, like then what do you do? That could have resulted in so many failures. And so then I started to figure out like that there's a lot of businesses for sale out there that are really good businesses.
Yeah.
And that the generations before me have built over time and put their heart and soul into, and they're ready to move on to the next stage of their life. And so I started exploring, how do I buy a business? Like, can you buy a business? What does that take? And so that led me to buying the first one, which is called Smart Enterprises. And that's been around since 1989 in Durango. It was previously owned by a person who's from Durango, and before that it was owned by her mom and her dad. And they started as a glass company, and then they were art framing, and then they added hot tubs and fireplaces and stoves and saunas and all kinds of stuff, and glass. And so I bought that in July, and then oddly enough, my next door neighbor, which is called Animus Glass, came for sale like 3 months after I bought that. And so it's a huge competitor.
Right.
They're probably like the biggest glass organization, maybe except for one other one in the area. But I was like, okay, it's next door to me. I already have people who know how to do glass, and like so much of this makes sense. And so I went for it. I had to talk with my wife, and I was like, can I do this?
We got to make it happen.
Like, can we do this? And she was like, we got to make it happen.
Talk to me about, so before the first purchase.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you had, well, I'll call it a very successful working career.
Mm-hmm. I got fired. I got fired from the medical sales
like
job.
Every good entrepreneur does.
Yeah, I got fired.
If you've never been fired, you're not meant to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean,
but you had the stability. You kind of explained this picture of like, I don't know, I'm envisioning this you're getting to go on vacation.
Yeah.
The team's working for itself and whatever. Yeah. I want to know, personally, the driving factor behind starting to look for a business to buy and why. Like, was it, Well, tell me about that. Like at that stage of your life, which is relatively recent past, but
it is.
Walk me through like life-wise and stage-wise, what made you want to look at business acquisition even as a path?
Yeah. I wanted to make the rules. Well, and I wanted to be able to break them too. And that's one of the things that so in that hospital I worked at, that was like 18,000 people. The daycare company that I worked at, that was almost 30,000. There's a lot of rules.
Right.
And there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of hoops to
jump
through.
Red tape, yeah.
And just like, to say like, I have a good idea. To bring that idea from idea to reality, it could take months or years sometimes. And so I'm not much of a rule follower, and I don't believe that there are a lot of like decisions that are super fatal. Most of the time it's a two-way door where if you walk through it and it sucks, you can usually turn around and walk right back out. Yeah. And so I really wanted to be able to do that. So that was a huge driving factor for me for buying a business. Was like, okay, I've got something that's established. I know that can make me an income, and I know that it can, support my family, and it also gives me the freedom to like build it how I want.
Make changes. Yeah. So, because when you were in the more of the corporate environment, did you feel like there was times when, I don't know, your ideas or the desire to change stuff was squashed or squabbled, or like, was that a frustration of yours?
For sure, because it's always prioritized against something else, right? Like a big company has its overall goals, and then each department has those goals, and then against those goals you have a budget.
Right.
And so, you're looking at the things that are driving the most business, and that's where most of the budget is going.
Right.
So sometimes that was me, but a lot of times that was not. And when it was me, okay, then they're saying, okay, Alex, now you've got this budget that you can do, this idea with. Then the time kicks in.
Yeah.
Because then you start. It's almost like being a builder, right? Like you're getting a bunch of subcontractors to support this big idea of yours.
Yeah.
And other people maybe they're upset that their idea didn't get picked.
Right. And then you got some politics.
Yeah.
Then you got the like who's reporting up, reporting down, and whatever, who's getting credit for it, who's going to do it.
Yeah.
It's complicated. Yeah.
Yeah.
I look back. So similar stories, but I worked for 11 years at a media-backed agency, and I had climbed the ladder, and I had the corner office. I was the director of digital revenue, and so I was responsible for digital revenue across all the divisions of the company, and I was really proud of where I had gotten. But I experienced something similar where it was like so hard to make meaningful change. It was like a trickle of it. It's like a version of it would maybe happen by the time it was done, but it wasn't not really what we were wanting to accomplish anyway, but better than nothing and whatever. And it's funny because now, and when I'm running the business, I sometimes even think I maybe move too fast. Like
I do sometimes.
I have ADD, and I was joking the other day. I was like, the best way for me to explain entrepreneurship as somebody with ADD is that I've got 1,000 things I need to do. 100 things I want to do, and about 11 that I'm going to actually get done.
Oh, yeah.
But in my mind, and it all feels like urgent, like I want to do it yesterday, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got all these things, and I love that, though, because it energizes me. Like,
for sure.
We've got that, I don't know if you saw that box that's on the table, but I'm working on these cool new welcome boxes for new clients, and I'm gonna make them all sweet and like wrap the box and fill them with swag and stuff.
Yeah, I love that.
And my business partner is laughing at me because we had the idea like a week ago, and I'm like executing.
Do it.
Like stuff's already ordered. It's like happening.
So cool. Yeah.
And it is fun to have that freedom of like, I don't know, being able to make the moves. But I loved your perspective of a two-way door.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that a little more. That idea that you can move fast, and if it doesn't work, you can come back through it. Where did you learn that, or is that something that you've learned through experience, or something you were taught?
I think it's actually Jeff Bezos.
Oh, okay.
I think because I remember that because one of my colleagues at Bright Horizons used to use it a lot.
I love that.
And it was and you could apply it to so many things, or it's like, okay, how much are we spending? Is that going to kill us? Okay, then go spend it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, you can walk back through the door. How much I don't know, people bandwidth is it taking up? Okay, is it going to be fatal to the other parts of the business if we allocate those resources here? No? Okay, go through.
Yeah.
Walk through the door, and if it doesn't work, walk on back. So that was just, I used
That's such a good mindset, because I think I'm definitely guilty. I sometimes, I move fast, but I also second guess myself
Yeah.
quite often. Like I'll overanalyze
Easy
or like
to do.
what, you know.
Yeah.
And I love that idea. That makes it feel so much less permanent.
Yep.
That
Yep.
we can always walk back.
Right. You can. Yeah. And you might lose a little money, but
sure.
As long as it's not
we're losing it anyway.
Yeah. As long as it's not fatal to the business, that's okay. That's a risk you took. It could have exploded and been the best thing for you, or it could be not the best thing and you walk back through.
And you're still, even if you walk back through, you're not starting from zero,
right.
because you've walked back through now with more information.
Yep.
More experience, more insight, you
right.
know, something that you tested and know more about. I love that.
Yeah.
What a great perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've used that a lot in my short time as a business owner, just to make decisions, because there are a lot of things that, as I go into this, I didn't work in hot tubs before this. I didn't work in fireplaces or stoves or glass. So I've had to use that model just to say, like, if I walk through this door, am I going to be okay to walk back out?
Did you know anything about the industry or the products that you sell before buying it?
Outside of owning a hot tub, no.
Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know anything.
Walk me through that, because I think that's fascinating. I had, her name's Jen Sokol.
Yep.
I had her on, her episode's not out yet, but it'll be out, well, next week.
Yeah.
Which, by the time people are listening to this, it's last week's. But she was explaining to me, because I'm fascinated with, you know, I've never purchased a business.
Mm-hmm.
I have started several.
Yep.
And I love building a business. Like it's really fun for me. I'll share a story later, but like when that first transaction happens of a new business, it's the coolest thing. It's like I feel like I created
mm-hmm.
a dollar,
mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been fascinated recently with the idea of purchasing,
mm-hmm.
you know, businesses. And one of the things that she was telling me is that rarely are the people who are buying businesses mm-hmm. experts in the fields of the business. They're business people,
yep.
which is something I had never considered yet. You know, I've always thought that in order to purchase a business, I need to know about that industry, or, you know, have training or something like that.
Nope.
Tell me about that from your perspective of, you know, and I don't mean to discredit, but just not knowing about the, you know, about that industry or the nuances there.
Yeah.
What gave you the confidence to still pursue purchasing a business like that?
Yeah. So there were a few main things. Number one, most businesses fail within 5 years. This business had been around for 40 years. So I knew it had some longevity, and I knew it had some reputation and ability to stay afloat. It also had a good financial history over the last 6-7 years. And so my basic business background in measuring its ability to make money and to pay employees and to stay afloat as a business, those were 3 key factors that I looked at from a financial analysis standpoint. I also just like that stuff. Like hot tubs are fun. Cold plunges are fun. Like, I like homes. I look at real estate sites all the time. And it's like one of the coolest things for me, like you said, creating a dollar. The first time that I helped put a fireplace in somebody's house, and then you see that fireplace look complete, you're like, man, that looks so cool.
Yeah.
Like, you get to do things for people's homes where they live, and you get to help them create like the home that they want.
Coming back to that impact piece.
So it gave me like some confidence to say like, oh, I don't need to have experience in this, but I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
And so I can get behind it.
Right.
And I can speak to the message and sell the message of like, hey, we're doing this thing for you, and we're bringing your dream in your home to life.
Were you worried about, like, aside from the expertise side of it, you know, I don't know if it's like the connections or the network or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the ability to continue to bring in new business, like, because that'd be a concern of mine if I were to buy a business, would be I would be worried about the relationship from the previous owner, and then the expertise, you know, like the memory that would go away too. Mm-hmm. Walk me through that, because knowing that, you know, because I can definitely see like being able to see the numbers of it, mm-hmm. and knowing that. Was there ever a concern in like the relationship side of it? And actually, I'd be curious your perspective too, because so many of these businesses rely on the employees. Yeah. Did you get to meet the employees first, or you just trusted that would carry over as well?
The first one was really private, and what I had heard from the owner of the first one was that she had got burned on her NDA, and so she was really, really picky and careful about who she talked to and who she sold it to.
Sure.
Because somebody, I think, had come into the store and said, "Hey, did you know this place was for sale?" Mm-hmm. And so that freaked out all of her employees.
Rightfully so.
So I didn't get to meet them beforehand. I just got, the overview from her. So a bit of it is you're taking a leap, right? Because anybody who's trying to sell you something is selling you something at its shiniest format. So of course the employees are great, and of course all the relationships are great, and everything is just awesome. So a little bit of it I had to trust, and I also had to trust that I could maintain them and that I had the skills to do that. And it was a lot of trust in myself, and knowing that there was a high likelihood that it was going to be okay.
Right.
Because a lot of people don't like change too. And so, for somebody to go from one supplier of hot tubs or fireplaces or glass that's easy for them and smooth for them.
They're in a rhythm. Yeah.
They're in a rhythm. They're building houses. They need this. They need that. That's a hard thing to change.
Right.
Because you're creating a new relationship with two people or with another person or another supplier. And so I was confident that I could keep things going in a way that was quality enough for the relationships that were there that that was going to keep going.
Yeah.
But then I could also put my own flair on it and say, hey, there is new ownership here. And I've got ideas and I want to work with you in a way that you haven't worked before. Or if there's things that you felt like you had, gripes about, I want to hear those. And so I did my best to stay as positive as I could about that, because I think I really could have gone down a negative rabbit hole and just let that sink me.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't.
You said your exact phrase, I think, there was that there was a high likelihood that it would work out.
Yeah.
Walk me through that mindset.
Yeah.
Because I love that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase that the world belongs to optimists.
Uh-huh.
In order to achieve big things, you have to believe you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the optimist only has to be right once.
Yep.
If I kept track of the amount of failures I have,
Yep.
quantity wise, but you only have to be right a few times, and then it works. Walk me through that mindset. Where did that come from? That confidence and that belief that there's a high likelihood it would work out.
There's this quote that I tell myself probably 50 times a day, and it goes, if you don't quit, you might make it, but if you do quit, you definitely won't.
You for sure
make it.
won't. I love that.
And so for me, that was just so powerful, because it just tells me just keep going. I might still fail. I have no idea. I'm early on in this journey, but I knew that I had good quality products. I have good employees who are smart and good creative problem solvers, and I have people who seem to care about what we're doing. And they need a job too.
Right.
Everybody needs a job.
It's in everyone's best interest for it to work.
Yeah, it is. And so if you can rally the troops around that and keep the environment happy and, I tried to keep things going as much as they could, without saying that there was a new owner. And that's worked out all right.
Yeah.
So for me, it was more just about not quitting and not giving up, rather than, really feeling 100% confident that it was going to work out. Because I didn't know, but I don't think that I could allow myself to think anything otherwise.
Yeah. No, you can't.
I couldn't.
Not if you're making the leap.
Yeah.
No, and that's where it's funny, because I look back, I've been in business for 4 years, and it's almost comical how little I knew now that I look back. And I mean, gosh, the amount of mistakes I've made, the clients that I've lost. I mean, God, the list is so long.
Yep.
But I think it's almost that if it weren't for, I'll almost call it blind optimism.
Mm-hmm.
I was naively confident in myself when I quit my job. But exactly, because otherwise, I'm grateful for that, and I wouldn't know now.
Yep.
Are you familiar with I forget what it's called, but it's basically the confidence and experience curve.
I don't think so.
And so if you chart experience is linear, right? It's it
over time you get more experience.
Confidence goes like this, drops, and then goes back. So early on you're I got it, and then the real world sinks in. Even though you have more experience, your confidence is lower. And I'm in that stage right now. I'm right here, even though but because I look back and I'm man, what I wouldn't have given to know the things I know now 4 years ago. But there isn't a shortcut to it. I think the only way to learn it is to do it and jump in. And so when I love that, there's a high likelihood it was going to work out. Because it was weird for me when I walked away from my corporate job. You've got kids, right? One kid.
Yeah.
I had two, and my wife was pregnant with our third.
Yep.
And I walked away from the benefits right
Same.
before childbirth. I walked away from the salary, the corner office. They had just remodeled
the comfort.
Yeah, the stability, all of it. But I never doubted for a second.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like, I'm going to go do this thing. Yeah. I knew it was going to be tight. Like, I knew financially it was going to be hard. And then it's funny, though, now with the benefit of hindsight, I had no right being that confident.
Yeah. And
but without it, you're not going to execute.
But I think there's a switch that flips a little bit too, and like you go from I know I can do this to I have to do this.
There's no choice. It's such a good point.
I have to do this.
Yeah.
Because I have my wife and my kid and our house and our life that we want to live still.
Right. Failure is literally not an option.
Yes, I have to do this now.
Yeah.
And so, but that's also a really cool place to be, I think. I like being in that. I thrive a little bit more in chaos.
Yeah.
When things are a little bit nuts, I'm just like, okay, this I can visualize a clear path out of this.
Right.
And so I think that was a big part of it, was that I was getting more joy out of the uncertainty and the chaos of it than I was about the everyday work from the corporate perspective.
Are you from are your parents entrepreneurs? Like, do you have entrepreneurs in your family? Like, where does talk me through that environment?
So my great grandpa George and his buddy Herb started a radio shop in Mason City, Iowa in like 1930.
No way.
And then my grandpa Daryl, my great grandpa George's son, he took that over and added TVs and stuff. So it was called Herb and George TV. It was like one of the oldest businesses in my town. My dad decided not to do that, but my grandpa did that until he was in his 70s.
Yeah, okay.
The only reason he quit is because he got cancer. Like, otherwise, he probably would still do it if he could.
Right.
And so my dad, he worked for, he's an electrician by trade, and he worked for a company, the corporate environment, for a long time, but then he started his own business in the last 10 years.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so him and his business partner, they didn't like the way it was going in the corporate environment, so they did their own thing. My mom,
so you've been able to see entrepreneurs. You've gotten to kind of watch it. Yeah. Do you think that helped with your confidence to make the leap?
Yeah.
What did your wife think?
Well, she saw how miserable I was in my and maybe miserable is a little bit too extreme, but she saw that I was just like wasn't doing well.
Yeah, not fulfilled.
Yeah, and she saw that I was bored, and she saw that I was trying to kind of fulfill other parts of my life, like getting outside and playing with my family and that kind of stuff. But she just knew there was something missing there, and so my wife is a very logical person. I am, but I also am like idea, chase the idea, chase it. That's so cool. That's so cool. That's so cool.
It's almost like operating on emotion.
Yeah.
I'm the same. Like, I've got the logical backing.
Yeah.
But I trust my instinct.
Totally.
And then
I use logic to make that instinct feel stronger.
Exactly.
Yep. And so I had to. She always kind of has to rein me in a little bit, and she says, "That's a great idea, but like, tell me about how that's going to work in practice." And so then you kind of have to walk through those finances carefully, and you have to walk through those employee elements of it carefully, and the business operations carefully. So I actually I love her support because it forces me to slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
And it forces me to really think through things and put them on paper, because it's like, this isn't just me going out there and buying a business and doing this. This is our life together.
Right.
And so I do have to be respectful of the fact that she takes on ideas differently than me. And when an idea comes, she needs to hear more about it rather than just jumping full steam ahead and backing out of that two-way door if you have to, you know what I mean? Yeah. So she, and by the time we had worked through it and talked about it, she was like, I'm in.
She was in. Okay.
Yeah, and she's excited. And, there was also like the community element of it, is that I was working remote for the last 5 years. I never saw anybody. I never had any social interaction. Right. And so now I'm a business owner at one of the oldest businesses in the community, and I meet people all the time. And I met somebody the other day who, they had an Iowa license plate and they were parked in my parking lot. And so I walked in and I was like, "Hey, who's the Iowan?" And they were like, "Oh, it's me." And I was like, "Oh, where are you from?" She's like, "I'm from Ottumwa." And I said, "I'm from Mason City." And she's like, "Do you know Steve Hugo?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he's my gym teacher, like my high school gym teacher." So like all the way out here, So I've just had, I think she's seen so much joy out of me. I mean, and obviously some really hard stuff too, because it's hard, but I think there's such a different happiness related to my work now that is so much more like, just like, the happiness is related to what's going on every day rather than like chasing this end goal of happiness.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I want to unpack that a little bit more, because one of the things that I experienced, I'm just curious if you relate to this, but in the corporate environment, there are personality traits of mine that had to evolve to become perceived as negative. My spontaneity, my optimism, my high energy levels, like there's certain things that just like, it's like, dude, chill out, in the corporate world. Yeah. I tell people when I started my own company that I got unleashed. And it let me lean into my personality and like bring humor to the table, or joke with people, or be fun or whatever. Like those things. And I found in the right environment, those personality traits are now a very, very good thing. They're positive, which has obviously also helped with like, happiness and self-fulfillment and stuff like that. Yeah. What I'm curious about, because you kind of are painting this picture of, you're painting a picture of a new chapter and like a new enjoyment of life, very happiness much. And all of that. Yeah. You also though mentioned how difficult it is. Yeah. And so I was going to ask, you're happier even though it's harder. Yeah. Tell me about it. Yeah. How is that possible?
Because overcoming the challenge is fun. Because for me, like when I was in that last job, nothing was difficult. And I had trained people to solve the problems, and they were good problem solvers. And at some point, that job just got to be a bunch of delegating. And so I didn't get to really dig in and solve difficult problems anymore. And I really leaned into the development of my team because that's what felt really important. And they were showing that they could do it. And so for me, it was kind of like, I'm not going to take something away from you just because I want the challenge. I want you as my teammate to develop into my role, and I want you to be able to take that on. Yeah. And so I became unhappy just because I wasn't being challenged.
Because you weren't being challenged.
Yeah. And so with this, it's like every day is a different challenge, and every day is an unusual circumstance, and every day is a new customer calling me about something. And it's not just the challenge in solving difficult problems, it's also the challenge of like, how do I get more sales? Right. How do I market correctly to my audience? How do I set up my showroom so that it's most effective? How do I make sure that my technicians are set up for their day so that they can effectively do their work and do it efficiently? Is their route mapped correctly so that their driving route is optimized? Like, there's so many more difficult and different problems to solve that maybe would seem now, looking back on it, really stupid in a corporate environment, but really important to me.
Which is fascinating. Yeah. And that's what I'm interested with, because if you were to survey most people, blind, like whatever, my guess would be if you said, hey, and let's just assume for conversation that incomes are equal. Yeah. Yeah. You have this job where, you've got people in place that solve your problems. It's pretty easy. You can delegate away. You've got a great team behind you, and whatever. Or you've got this one where you don't know what you're walking into every day. You're, metaphorically firefighting, like whatever. Yeah. And it's uncertain and, all that stuff. Yeah. What would you pick? Most people would probably pick this one on paper. What's interesting about it, in fact, I think it's Jordan Peterson who talks about how the worst life you could imagine is pina coladas on the beach. It would be miserable. Yeah. It would drive you insane. It would. And I think that's so fascinating about the human journey and like life and stuff, is how important challenges are for us. Totally. It's so counterintuitive.
Yep, it is.
Like you think you want the path of least resistance, but I've talked to so many people who have found that the path of least resistance is also the least fulfilling and the least satisfying, the least happy. Yeah, absolutely. It's just like I don't know. And it sounds like that's been your experience as well.
Yeah, I think there's like I have some inherent thing where it's like I need to teach myself that I can overcome challenges.
Teach yourself it. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, and it's like, so I put myself through this stuff purposefully because I want to know if I can do it. Yeah. I would say that was going back to your earlier question about like, what was the driver? That was a huge part of it. I want to bet on myself because I believe in myself, and I want to find out if I can do it. Yeah. And did I take a big risk in doing that? I sure did. But I'm finding out now, and I'm gonna find out, and I'm gonna continue to find out. And I still don't know for sure if I'm doing it or not.
Right.
But I hope someday I can look back on it and say I found out.
Yeah.
And I'm happy about it.
I had a psychologist on a while back, and I'll butcher how she worded it, but she basically said that confidence is the reward for having the courage to do it. Mm-hmm. Most people think they have to have the confidence first. No. It's the courage.
Take the step.
Yeah. And I love that idea, like you're saying, about proving to yourself.
It was for nobody else.
Yeah.
It wasn't for my wife. It wasn't for my kid. It wasn't for my parents. It was for me. And maybe that seems selfish, but...
So when you're looking at... Sorry, finish your thought.
But and maybe that seems selfish, but, it's not like the outcomes of it are just for me either. It's like my family and I do get to get a good life. Like we do get to meet a lot of people in the community now. Like there are some outcomes that have really benefited us that we otherwise wouldn't have had. So It wasn't totally selfish, but that element of it where it was like I needed to know if I could do it, that was for me.
Yeah.
That was for me.
When you were looking at looking at the options, mm-hmm. right? At what level did the potential income, like if you had to weight that as an influence on your decision?
Yeah.
You've talked about these things of like proving to yourself right and like making the leap and feeling happy and fulfilled and whatever. Yeah. Money also matters.
It does, yeah.
But when you were looking at you're looking at the options of like safe job, taking the leap, what weight did income have on the overall decision?
In the first one, I would say it had more because it was I needed to replace my income.
Right.
Like Durango's an expensive place to live, and my wife has a job too, But we knew that in order to maintain the life that we had, I needed to be able to maintain a certain level of income.
Yeah.
And so that was the main.
From a maintenance perspective, though, or were you like, did you make the leap because of economic upside, or was it
definitely.
more of that it would stay where you were at?
It was both. It was at a minimum I needed to be able to maintain, and
it could look like this,
and there was an economic upside. There has been, and that's really awesome. But I just and what was nice about that was that it gave me some padding.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm reaping the rewards of an economic upside, and if things go poorly, I have some room.
There's a plan B, or not a plan B, but a
contingency,
a backstop. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a backstop there, and so that's allowed us to be, to save more money, to, do some fun things that we want to do, and and feel a little bit more financially stable.
Right.
And now we know that there's, what our minimum threshold was. We're trying not to inflate our lifestyle too much and that kind of thing. But,
yeah. It's the best thing my wife and I have ever done is we've never had lifestyle creep.
Yeah.
And it has set us up for so much success. She's a real estate agent.
Yeah.
And we've always lived on my income.
Yep.
And then every time she has a closing, we just invest it.
Yeah.
Just set it aside and stack it.
Yep.
And I think that's actually been probably the most powerful decision we ever made, because it let us. It gave me the freedom to quit my job.
Right.
Because when I quit, there was no income.
Yep.
Like I remember, I quit in October, and I remember that December, that Christmas, it was like this tiny Christmas with the family. Like I took pictures of it, even but it was so fun.
Yeah.
It was so happy and fulfilling, and it was like we're building something for ourselves.
Yep.
And. Yeah, anyway, making that happen. But it's so cool to I love that you have that perspective too of like not letting the lifestyle creep happen and staying there, because then it gives you these other opportunities like another business.
Exactly.
And, whatever else. So I'm curious, before the new purchase, if you had to I don't know, unpack challenges or lessons learned, what would you say has been the hardest part of or the thing that surprised you the most from business ownership and entrepreneurship, or the hardest thing?
Yeah, one of the major ones that I had to overcome was like my what's the best way to put it? Like my corporate training, if you will. One of the first days I was talking to my employees and they were asking about vacation, and I said, "Well, this is what I'm going to do for PTO." And several of them were like, "What's PTO?" And I was like, "Oh man, it's paid time off." And so they were like, "Is that the same as vacation? Is that?" So it was changing my vernacular. And it was just changing the way that I approached people and the way that I listened to things. And that was a really dull but powerful moment for me as the boss, just where I was in the environment. I'm trying to connect with people. I'm trying to talk to people about things.
Trying to speak their language.
Yeah, but that was a really good sign that it's you're not doing that.
Right.
And so you need to be a little bit more mindful of how you're approaching us. And you need to get a little bit more understanding of the way that we think about things. and the way that we do things. And so that really set me on a path to be a better listener.
Yeah.
And it set me on a path to be a little bit more simple in my explanation of things, to slow down a bit, and just to be really careful about and like think about the situation before I go into it.
Yeah.
Of like, how am I going to say this? How am I going to approach this difficult conversation? I need to make sure that I don't, use these big words, or I don't use these confusing acronyms or things like that.
Right.
Because maybe they do know, maybe they don't, but I should assume that they don't.
Right.
And that's going to help me
communicate better. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a big surprise. The other was just how much they respected me being there with them. Because I wanted to go and install a fireplace and pick up some glass and put it in a shower and move a hot tub around. And, one of the employees said, I've never seen the boss sweep the floor. And it was like, well, this is our shop. For me, like, I'm just sweeping the floor. And I didn't think about it. I thought it was just there was a broom, the floor was dirty, you go pick up the broom and you sweep the floor.
Yeah.
But for him, that was a really powerful moment. Because he had never seen a boss in his career sweep the floor.
Wow.
And so that was just like things that were surprising to me, that for me, it's just like, oh, these are just normal things that I would expect, I guess. But for them, it's like their perspective is so different than yours.
Right.
And so learning about their perspective and then, thinking about those things that you can do and the things that are going to really help them thrive. By just either, being there for them or communicating with them effectively or just listening to them, helping them with whatever it is that they're struggling with. That's been the most, I think I've just been really surprised at how powerful that is.
Yeah, I love that.
Because, I came from an environment, a white collar environment where everybody's very well educated, everybody's relatively stable, and you all kind of learn to speak the same language.
Right.
And so it was just a totally new world for me in terms of who I was communicating with and what we were communicating about.
Yeah. The real world instead of the corporate world.
A little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit.
What's been the most rewarding part of it, or what's been like your favorite even?
Yeah. So in this second purchase, so when I purchased Smart Enterprises and then I purchased Animus Glass, and with Animus Glass I was really confident because I had my office manager at Smart Enterprises. She'd worked there for 25 years. She knows like everything about glass. But she had been an office manager for a long time. My flat glass person, which is like a shower and enclosures, he's done flat glass for like 16 years. And then my windshield person, he's done windshields for like 18 or 20. And so when I moved them to Animus Glass, you like saw them. I'm like seeing them thrive.
They're pumped. Oh, how cool!
Yeah, they're pumped and they're like taking it by the reins. And that was a risk. Like I didn't know how they were going to respond. But I gave them this opportunity to, I gave the office manager at Smart the title of general manager over there, and she's just crushing it.
Yeah.
And the same thing with my flat glass guy. Like I gave him, the lead flat glass guy over there, and he's just crushing it. And you're just like, you don't know how people are going to respond to those opportunities, but I knew that they were ready for them.
Right.
And I knew that they had the skills to do it, but I put them in the position and they're just taking off.
How cool.
And that's been really rewarding for me because I didn't know if they were going to respond the way that I expected, but they've far exceeded my expectations.
Yeah. Because walk me through that second purchase too, because, I have to imagine that like, right on the heels of purchase number one.
It feels crazy.
Yeah. The money going out versus the money coming in is probably a little bit skewed.
Yeah.
And, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. What, aside from, because you described kind of the role of your team members there and having, the confidence in them.
Yeah.
Did you feel like, well, I guess the question is did you purchase that business because there was an opportunity there, obviously, with the competitor?
Yeah.
Or did you already feel like you were ready for another one, or both?
It was both. Yeah. My plan since I started this stuff is to get to a place where maybe I own 3 to 5 businesses in the area, and you have good general managers who operate them on a daily basis, and you kind of oversee it. So it was a little bit of both. It just happened to be good timing, and it happened to be a competitor, and it happened to be competitor that does really quality work.
Yeah, and a good competitor.
Yeah,
which good competitors are great.
It's great. Yeah. And it also happened to be my next door neighbor.
Yeah, which helps.
So that was such a big deal because I just walk down the street and there they are.
Right.
Instead of having to get in my car, make it a 30-minute drive, and it just makes it so much easier for us to maintain relationships with everybody between the two companies because we can just walk down the block. So there was a little bit of that. It's also a profitable business.
Yeah.
And it's windshields in Colorado. Everybody breaks their windshield in Colorado.
Stable
So there's very repeatable business. And so that was a big driving factor, was that it was something that would serve the community. You have cash-based and insurance-based windshield replacements and rock chips and stuff. But it has a lot of stability.
Has it changed your workload buying a second business?
A little bit. Not much, because and that was a conversation that I had with my general manager at the beginning, that you're going to be running the day-to-day.
Right.
There are things that I will take care of, and we'll keep in close contact on those things, but ultimately this is your opportunity to do that. And as a result, she's better off financially, and she gets a title bump, and she gets an opportunity to do. I've kind of given her the reins to say, you do this your way because you know how to do this.
Right. So it's a win-win.
It's a win-win, yeah. And so my workload hasn't. It's gotten a little bit more, but
not doubled.
No, not by any means. And I've also made some improvements in our ability to work more efficiently that have helped me balance my workload a little bit better.
Do you think without your corporate experience that you would have been as successful in business ownership?
No.
In what ways?
Corporations, while they have a lot of rules, they also have a lot of structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used a lot of that structure. And I've learned to implement structure in a way where it's like you can, like clearly setting expectations, or clearly mapping out how a job should go, or making a process to say, like, this is how I want this to happen, and having your team follow that.
Right.
So that structure has really helped me take some of that like chaos in business ownership and put a form to it so that I can say, this is how I know it's supposed to be done, and measure against that.
Yeah.
And be able to say, are we doing it that way today? No, we're not. Okay, then that's not how I want to do it.
Right.
And so, or does that way not work, and maybe we need to adjust it. So that has been I don't think without that structural experience.
Yeah. Just even in terms of process.
Yeah. Process, procedure, mapping things out, building things and seeing them, putting them in like a format where it's not just an idea, but
right.
You say like, well, how does that actually work? And then you be like building ROIs, being able to say, like, if we make this investment, is it likely to pay off?
Right.
I did a lot of that in my corporate work. And so those things have really helped me, just kind of be able to feel confident in wrangling some of those crazy
controlling it a little
things.
bit.
Yeah.
For me, one of the biggest ones that was helpful was learning how to read financials. Because I would have never but I got really lucky. My CEO was a great mentor of mine.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that as I kind of climbed the ladder, I got to have we had to have one-on-ones and like really dig into the P&Ls and the balance sheets and like the true financials of it. And that I think is one of the biggest. Like, we'll talk to people now and they're surprised at how clean our books are for a 4-year-old marketing agency, but that's one thing that's helped me a ton for sure, is like the financial side of it. I think definitely that there's some pros and cons to both. Some people definitely jump straight into entrepreneurship, or business ownership or whatever, but we have a little bit of similar stories where there was enough time in kind of more of a corporate environment, and I actually think that it definitely helped me too. Financial for sure. Also, like, communication styles, like, and there's that balance, like you had mentioned, of the, we don't want to be corporate.
No.
To be very clear, like, the last thing I want to do is create a corporate environment.
Definitely
at
not.
Ascent Digitally. That'd be the worst.
Yep.
But there are ways where, like, I've learned how to craft the email or to hold the meeting, Here's our agenda. Anything you want to add to it?
Yep.
Ending one of the ones that's helped me a ton is ending meetings with action items.
Yeah.
I think you've even experienced it. It's like,
absolutely.
Here's the meeting. Okay, well, what are we going to do now?
Yep.
Boom, boom, boom. Great.
Yep. Yeah.
Otherwise, it was a waste of everybody's time.
Totally.
So those little tricks, I think, I don't know. I think there's a cool balance if, for people listening that are like, wondering about entrepreneurship or a job or whatever, it's not a bad thing to get some work experience because you learn so much of those other things. I will say, and I'm curious if it's for you, different versions of the same story in the sense that you've bought a business. I started one.
Yeah.
It's been, the learning curve for me has been very steep in the other stuff, like the legal, like the LLC and the insurance and like all that red tape stuff has been stuff that if I never have to deal with that again, I'd be thrilled.
Yeah, awesome.
Jumping through those hoops would be, if I never have to do it again, it'd be too soon. Yeah. And it's harder than I expected.
Totally.
Like all of it. I mean, all of it's harder than I anticipated, but simultaneously more rewarding too. I've never worked more in my life. I'm also more stressed than I've been.
Same.
But I'm also happier.
Yeah.
More fulfilled and which is so
Isn't
conflicting.
It weird?
It's so weird.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Yeah, I feel the same way, and I'm still in the middle of trying to figure out how to like balance the other parts of my life, with wanting to dedicate my time and energy to business and also wanting to make sure that I take care of myself.
Yeah.
Take care of my family. And
are you finding ways?
No, I'm not. Just to be completely frank, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's been really difficult.
Yeah. I relate to that in such a huge way. Talk to me about that, like the balancing and the challenges there.
Well, just like, you're like starting to make trade-offs and stuff. It's like, I bought this first business last summer, and like, here's a good example. Like a lot of my friends in my neighborhood and around the neighborhood, they go ride bikes at Twin Buttes on Tuesdays. Yeah. And so I loved it. And I did it every day, every Tuesday. I never missed a Tuesday when I was in my corporate job because, my day was so structured. Right. But then I started missing it. And I started making the decision to do work stuff over that. Or because, I went from a remote environment to being in an office all day long, I needed to go home and see my wife and kid. Yeah. Because my kid only stays up till 7. Right. So you only get an hour and a half. So
if you're lucky.
Yeah. And so I've kind of tried to be really conscious about like the decisions that I've made, and I have made a lot more decisions lately that have been in support of more work stuff. Yeah. And that has been at the expense of, taking better care of myself. And so I'm trying to do more things like eat better and, not drink very often and that kind of thing. Yeah. Not have any destructive habits in that way. But there's no doubt that finding the time, especially after you've expended a lot of energy at work, and then like a 2-year-old, that takes a lot of energy out of you. Yeah. By the time 7 o'clock rolls around, I'm pretty wiped. Done. And so I'm still working on finding that discipline to say like, hey, this is important for you. And I notice it when I do it. You get up and you work out, you lift some weights, you go for a run, you take the dogs for a walk for 30 minutes. You come back and you're like, that was really nice. Yeah. But I haven't figured out how to get over that hump. Yeah. That's been really hard. So hard. Yeah.
If I had the answers, I would share them.
Yeah, of course, right?
It's because I relate to it so much. Last week, my wife explained it that it felt like I was on a business trip and I was home. Mm-hmm. That's how little they saw me last week. Yeah. I flew in a new employee, and I was training them and working hard, and we had a nightmare. I worked a 19-hour shift last Friday, a true 19-hour. I left the house at 4:30 to take him to the airport, and then after, I'll save everyone the saga of travel, but I ended up driving back from Albuquerque at 9 p.m. and whatever. And then literally yesterday, I left the house before the kids woke up, and I got home after they went to bed, and I had nothing left in the tank, drained it. Yeah. I had a friend on, her name's Sloan. I had her on the show a while back, and she shared with me a perspective about viewing life in seasons. Mm-hmm. And I loved it because it helped remind me, because I think we're similarly wired in the sense that I want it all to be perfect all the time. All the time. Like, I want to be in peak physical fitness. I want to be eating perfect. I want my business to be thriving. I want to be spending quality time with my kids and my wife. And, and we all know that just ain't happening.
It's just not possible.
Like, and especially as dads, we have these conflicting responsibilities. Mm-hmm. We have to provide for our families financially. Yep. And we have to be there for them emotionally and physically and whatever. Yep. And the two conflict. Yep. Literally just can't. Yeah. They can't happen at the same time. Yeah. And so I'm trying to figure that out, man. Because one thing that's helped me is I schedule in my workouts, and I'm making those non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. Like I work out every day, at least for like today I got 30 minutes, but I at least got 30 minutes.
Yep.
And then I'm believe it or not, I'm going to take time off this week, Thursday and Friday,
Nice.
and I'm going to actually take time off. Like I'm going to disconnect, because
Good.
that's one downside to the agency business is that it's always in my pocket. The whole business is I mean, and everybody's connected nowadays anyway.
Yeah.
And so like I've traveled and stuff, but I've never like truly turned it off.
Right.
Like disconnected and
Yeah,
whatever.
it's hard to.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
But I'm learning that, because I'm at a chapter right now where I'm flirting with burnout. I'm actually flirting with it.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to make some changes and try to like find some of that balance stuff. One of the things my business partner, Brittany, who you've met, has taught me is that like she's been so good about boundaries.
Yeah.
And she's a single mom, so you talk about somebody with a very full plate, but she won't text me back if it's too late or whatever. And for a while it would drive me nuts, and then I'm learning that like she disconnect. It's good. It's okay. Taught me that like how healthy that is. Yeah. And so I'm working on it, but gosh, it's hard.
Here's a good perspective for you from somebody who worked in a hospital.
Yeah.
If something gets messed up in a hospital, somebody might die.
Right.
If something gets messed up at a marketing agency, what happens?
Yeah.
Life probably goes on.
Probably.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's so funny though, practicing what you preach, I like do as I say, not what I do. I tell the team all the time, I'm like, guys, it's just digital marketing.
Yep.
It's all good.
It's going to be okay.
But then
it's important.
But when it's on me,
it's
like life or death, and it's so funny. But I think that it's actually, I think it's doing more harm than good at this stage for me.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, there's those seasons. So I like to run ultras.
Yeah.
And so in the summertime, I carve out more time
to do
for
that.
Running and training, and like I make that a priority. I was telling you that I looked into buying that other agency for a while.
Yep.
And so we had some cash reserves for that now we're not using. And so now we're in this really fun chapter of like growth initiatives that aren't that
cool.
So it's a ton of work.
Yeah.
And it's like so it's always these like trade-offs. So anyway,
Always.
I get it so much.
Yeah, and I think about what you said a lot, where it's like you're trying to make it all like perfect.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to break it down in like chunks. Like you said, you got to schedule your workout. Like, okay, do one thing first.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like I made a change recently where now I work Tuesday through Saturday. And I'm off Sundays and Mondays. And my wife and kid are home Sundays, and they're home on Mondays.
Oh, how great.
Like together. Like he doesn't go to daycare on Monday.
Right.
So it's like that was such a nice move, because now we can spend that quality time together and get 2 full weekend days together where it's just us.
Yeah.
And I can answer a text here and there. It's all fine and good. But like, before that, it was like my days were Saturdays off sometimes, but I was rotating with other people.
Right.
And so sometimes I'd be off Saturdays and then I'd get a Sunday off. And so this is just so much more nicely structured in a way that supports what our family is trying to do. And it's like, I'm just trying to take that first step.
Love it.
To getting like other things in balance.
Yeah.
And so let's get there. Let's get used to that. Let's get comfortable with that and see what else that generates.
Right.
Because like yesterday I was home on a Monday, work was going just fine. Everybody's doing fine. You go out and you walk the dog. Okay, great. I can get into this. I could do it. I could do an hour walk with the dogs every Monday. That's awesome. Like, so I think I'm curious now, and I'm curious for you, like as you start to build in these, these single elements of change, like what else is that going to generate?
That they could compound.
Yeah. What else is that going to generate for you?
Yeah.
And what else, like, are you going to find from that where you have those moments where you're just with yourself, not thinking about work, or just with your family?
Right.
Like, what kind of joy are you going to get out of that?
Yeah. And man, and what's cool is that I do believe it's possible.
Uh-huh.
And I'm learning too that I'm better when I do that.
Yeah.
Like, when I work on the business, even because I like working. Like I like the grind. Some of my favorite times are when I get in here early, no one's here, and I turn on music on the TV and I work.
Just work.
And it's undistracted. And like we do work from wherever Fridays, which means I'm at the office Fridays.
Yeah.
But it's great because it's quiet and like so there's that balance there. But no, for sure of that like, and then you can slowly build on it.
Yeah.
Like you start with the one thing, you schedule that in.
Yep.
And then it's like
okay, now
today's going to be this one, and I mean, because that's kind of the point, right? And I think it's so important to not get lost in that. Like, at the end of the day, the whole reason I'm doing this is for the family anyway.
Right. Do you think that if you get too structured, you get like anxious about it?
Yes.
Me too.
Yeah, there's a fine line there because the whole point of this is flexibility.
Yeah,
too. But I've learned that
and like newness, and fun, and
like the spontaneity of it. But I've learned that my default will be to overwork if I don't have some of the structure.
Yeah,
you know, like do I always do my workout when it's on the calendar? No. But it's on the calendar at least. So I know like I was supposed to work out. Yeah, like today it's on the calendar at 10, and I did a 30-minute or at 1:30, you know, like what, but I got it done still. So no, I think that, and some of that I think is probably just giving ourselves permission to the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. Yeah. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's really hard because I have found myself like, you know, you get into your routine of something and like it feels good for a while and you're like, all right, I got a routine. And then you're like, I need to change something. Yeah. You know, and so you just like totally disrupt your life. And then it's hard to get back to that.
Right.
And so I don't know how to overcome that in a way where it's like maybe that's a little bit of gratitude.
Yeah, gratitude.
You know, maybe it's that, like allowing yourself to feel some gratitude for like life feels simple. Because I think that, like I said, I kind of thrive in that chaos, and when things feel a little too simple, I think I connect that to maybe some boredom.
Yeah.
But it's also like my wife is really good about reminding me that like we have a really nice life, and like, you know, because like I said, like I always look at real estate and stuff, and she's like, you know, moving is fun, and it's also nice to just have a home to come home to.
Just not move.
Yeah, it's also nice to have your home the way you want it, and to have your blankets on the couch, and to have, you know, like your lamp that puts out nice light, and
what a great perspective.
Like have your kid just running around. Like it's just such a nice thing that she reminds me of every now and then, that it's like comfort is also a good thing.
Yeah.
Like pushing yourself and going far and trying to see what you can overcome is great. And allowing yourself to be comfortable and happy in that comfort is also a really
I think that you just nailed it. That's the trick, is this like extreme ambition combined with intense gratitude along the way.
Totally.
It's like we're headed somewhere, but we're grateful for where we are while we're headed there.
Yeah.
And I used to be better at it, and I got to work better to get back at that, because like I'm now like laser focused on growth, and it's too much.
Yeah.
Like because I have a great life.
Yeah.
I have more than I could have ever dreamed.
Same.
Like if you would have told me 10 years ago that I'd have the life I have now, I'd be like, no way, that's crazy. And then I'm like, well, you know, we should have grown more, or you know, whatever, this thing happened, or you know, all that stuff, and I get all hard on myself. And I think it's such a delicate balance, because that's where I think I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's, I think, that's where joy lives.
Totally.
Because we talked about it earlier, the need for challenge, the need for, you know, the difficulty and pushing ourselves and growing and whatever.
Yeah.
But it can't just be that.
Can't.
Because otherwise that's when you go crazy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you can be grateful for the journey, love that perspective. Because that's where the balance is for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's so hard when you're a driven individual to like allow yourself the time to look back at that.
Right.
To just stop and say like, you know what, it's been a good couple months.
Yeah.
Like, because I think we focus on a lot of problems too, and like as problem solvers, like that's what you are as a business owner. You're always trying to solve problems.
Right.
But I don't know that I can't count how many times over the past month I've allowed myself to sit back and say, hey, good job solving that problem, Alex.
Yeah.
Like, you did it.
Yeah.
I like almost because I feel like I don't even have time to do that.
Which is good that you're doing that too, because especially as, you know, business owners, nobody tells you good job.
Nobody. It's a thankless job.
Like I promise you, nobody's like, hey Ben, good work today.
Yeah. Like I gave my employees a Christmas bonus, and like nobody said thank you.
Right.
And I'm like, cool guys.
Yeah,
all right.
Like I'm trying here, you know.
Thanks. Yeah.
It's funny because when I started my company, I remember like dreaming of how cool it would be if I can get it to a point where I have an employee. Like I remember thinking like that would be crazy if I can get to that point. And then I did have for everybody listening, I do have gratitude, a lot of it. I need to be better at it. But recently I walked in here, we got that new wall painted, and I got these glass walls in and stuff. And I did have a moment, I walked into the office and I'm like, this is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
Like, look what I've built.
Yep.
You know, there's 7
you should be proud of
full-time people here now. And it's like, and that's an area I've got to improve on in a big way, is being proud of what I've already done while working on the, you know, because I still have a lot more I want to accomplish.
Of course you do.
And I think what that is just making sure that we're careful not to move the goalpost. Like, we still want to get better. We still want to improve. I still want to grow. Yeah. But like,
well,
doing good.
And being kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Being kind to yourself in a way that it's like, hey, I know you're a hard charger, but take a second.
Yeah.
Just sit here. Like I think we think that every second, minute is so precious, and it is because you have a limited time on Earth, and using those seconds and minutes to reflect on things and to think about things and not just be in the mode of hard charging all the time is going to provide you so much more appreciation for those times when you overcome something.
Right.
And it's like when you're wrapped up in it and you're in that season of like, I'm going and I'm building and I have a goal and I'm going to get it and I'm going to overcome it. It is just so difficult.
Difficult.
To stop and say, have I made any progress? And have I, maybe I've hit some milestones that I didn't think I would.
Right.
And maybe it generated some other things that I didn't think it would.
Yeah, and celebrating the wins and all of that.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
What would be your advice? Somebody's listening right now. Mm-hmm. They're bored in their job. Mm. They're thinking about entrepreneurship or, buying a business or starting one or whatever.
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Don't be scared. Don't be scared. There's a lot of really good businesses out there. And you can do a lot of research and you can go really far without being overly committed. You can go and I think people get kind of like scared of the process. Like people are like, oh, I don't want to sign an NDA. Well, it doesn't mean anything. It just means you're not supposed to disclose all the financials of this business. So go sign it and explore it. And I think use that as a time to learn about yourself a bit too. Like in my situation specifically, I had hours of the day where I just had time to go look at businesses and review their financials and get curious about like, what does that mean? Like, what's a quality of earnings report? And then it helped me really dive deep into those financials to say like, is this a good business or not? Like cash flow is really good, but this metric is off, and that's kind of scaring me. And so I guess if you have the time, use it well, because otherwise you'll just waste it sitting there looking at your computer doing nothing, right?
Instagram
like, yeah. So I mean, but I think that there's a lot of confidence to be had in buying businesses specifically because, man, there's a lot of really good businesses out there that have a lot of history, and there's a lot of things that I would recommend that people look at that are so important to keeping a community up. HVAC, that kind of thing, like windshields for one.
Yeah.
Service-based businesses are just crushing it.
Yeah.
So laundromats, like there's the one next door is for sale. So there's just like always be curious about what's out there and take the leap, man. I would say that's the biggest thing is take the leap.
Do it. Yeah.
Just like action is so much more powerful than like just thinking about it, because I can't tell you how many years I wasted. Not wasted. I shouldn't say that's unfair to myself, but years I spent just thinking about ideas,
right? And
thinking about, oh, that would be cool. I should do that.
Yeah.
Now I can actually look back. Like even if I failed, I can say I did that.
Yeah.
And that I think is so much more powerful than anything else, because like you want to be proud of yourself, and you want to, you want to say that you did it. At least for me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably what I would say is like just take the first step. Just take it. Like file the LLC. Like if it costs you $25, you lost $25. But now you have an LLC. Now you can do some stuff with it.
Right.
Like you can make it something if you want, or you could just let it sit there. But you own that business name now, and that's cool. So yeah, man, just that leap is so important to take, and I think that sometimes it can feel a lot bigger than it actually is too.
I love it.
I think sometimes the leap can seem like it's like leaping over the Grand Canyon, but really it's two-way door, right? Like back to the two-way door. Like, dude, if you buy an LLC, you can also just
walk back back through.
You can just let it sit there and fizzle out too.
Right.
So it's just, I don't know. There's that. Yeah. Take the leap.
Yeah.
Take the leap.
I love it.
Yeah.
Alex, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
This has been a blast.
Yeah, super fun.
It's just so fun to catch up. It's so fun to see what you're doing.
Thanks.
It's fun to see you purposely doing the hard thing and, navigating those ideas with balance and, figuring it out along the way.
Yeah, being conscious of it.
And so I've got one of my Inspired by Example shirts for you, which I know was a surprise. You didn't see
it. Was.
I
didn't.
It's funny? My last 3, I forgot to get it before, and I'm like, hold on, and then I grab it because you're inspiring by example.
Yeah, thank you.
It's just so cool to see you taking the leap, making it happen, raising the family, contributing to the community. I mean, all of these things, and I just want to thank you for that because it's refreshing and it's appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is such a nice gift, and I've never podcasted before, but this was so much fun.
I'm glad.
So thank you for having me. That was awesome.
It's my pleasure. We'll do it again for sure.
Cool. Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thanks.